Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Ereb Altor, Vargtimman, out January 14th on Hammer Heart Records. This album has 8 tracks, 42 minutes in length, and this is the band's 9th full-length studio album. They are a Swedish pagan black metal band. Now this is a record that has two sides of one single coin. There are differences and there are similarities. Starting with the similarities, when you look at the shape, the way one side starts versus the way it finishes, you start to see that it repeats itself on the second side, considering how it was structured on the first side. So the boxes, the shapes of these two sides are very equal to one another. This allows the album to have diversity within it, but still feel continuous, feel connected, and feel very balanced from one approach to the next, making the overall playability of the record feel uninterrupted. The differences that these two sides offer are within the boxes themselves. The songs themselves within those two sides pull the barometer towards a different side of the band. On the first half, I really felt like the album was a lot more atmospheric. And on the second half, I felt like the album was more black metal driven. This is not to say that you're not going to find black metal elements on the first side and you're not going to find atmospheric elements on the second. You will. They're throughout the entire record. But the mood, the essence that you walk away from each side really feels different. When you finish the first portion of the record, you feel like you went through more of an atmospheric journey. And when you finish the second half, you feel like you were more driven through it because of the black metal influences were a little bit more predominant. This, like I said, adds volatility, adds diversity to the record, but having the same shapes on both sides really brings it all together. Once you talk about the sound of this album, you have to mention how incredibly put together this record is. First of all, it feels like a live record. It has a movement within the soundscape. It doesn't feel stagnant. It doesn't feel static, that it stays in one place, and the same approach that you get in the first song is going to be the exact same approach that you're going to get throughout the entire album, regardless of what's influencing the drive or what's influencing the atmosphere. The record feels completely different from that. When you look at a live album, you always feel like the sound is moving depending on where the band members are, depending on the movement that they're having on stage, how it's being recorded, and what they're trying to capture. This record really feels that way, but in a studio setting. When you're listening to the album, you start to notice that the sound is traveling and it's moving away from you and it's coming closer, and it's moving away from you, it's coming closer. It has all of this essence to it that really makes it feel like a heartbeat. The album has soul, it has heart, and the sound really defines these parameters. It really defines these emotions extremely well from beginning to end. You notice it on every single song. Perhaps the more atmospheric tracks allow you to feel it a little bit more. It goes in a little bit deeper. The more driven songs kind of cover it up and become a little bit more direct. But regardless, the sound quality and the execution is outstanding throughout this entire album. It really helps the atmosphere, and it really helps the stories that are incorporated in the lyrical content and in the way these songs are designed. Now within this soundscape, you have the keyboards, bass, drums, and guitars. These are all important elements in order to get to where you need to go and in order to create that movement of sound that exists within this record. The keys are important because they add atmosphere to the record without being a predominant element that really drives the experience. You almost don't notice that they're there, and that's how important they are. You want them to have an impact. You want them to create layers of sound, layers within the atmosphere. You want the images that they're trying to portray with their music to become a little bit clearer for the listener, and the keyboards definitely do that without really jumping into the forefront, and that's why I find them so important on a record like this. The bass is phenomenal. You're going to notice the bass from the first song all the way through. It really pops, you notice it, you feel it, and it has a positive impact in how the whole album comes together. It adds soul to the sound. It adds thickness to the sound. It helps ground the album and really define these little details that become very important in the big picture. The same could be said for the drums. The drums on this record are some of the best that I've heard in recent time because of the impact that they have. A lot of that movement that you're going to find, a lot of that coming and going, it's really defined by what the drums are putting forward. The drums are heavy at times on this album, but they don't jump into the forefront. They don't overshadow the guitars, the vocals, or even the atmosphere, the experience. They're more in the background, and the movement that they create really expands and contracts the sizes of the songs, how much volume they have, the intensity that they carry, and even the darkness that they put forward. Magnificent job on the drums throughout the entire album. The guitars offer a little bit more of a drive. They're perhaps the fuel that adds to the fire of this album. When the songs are more melancholic, the guitars take you far deeper into the existence of the tracks, into how this whole album is coming together, and really allows you to lose yourself within the record, but always finding your way out. And the songs that are more black metal driven, that have a little bit more grit, they're a little bit harder, a little bit more punchy, you really feel like they're pushing you forward, not really letting you stop or pause throughout the existence of those songs. So they really become the motor of the record, pushing you in the right direction, and the direction in which the songs wants to take you, in which the lyrics want to provide the experience for you, and that becomes a very defining moment and a very defining element of the whole record. On top of all of this, you obviously have the vocals. The vocal performance is really interesting on this album because it doesn't follow patterns. It's really hard to try to imagine what the next song is going to give you, because every single track has a slightly different DNA to it, and the vocals really match that DNA in terms of what they're going to give you. From the cleaner side of the vocals to the harsher, heavier, darker vocals, the layers that the vocals have, the chanting, the volume, all of this really helps define the life that it is, this album. When you look at the sound and you look how incredible this record moves, that sense of being a live album in the studio, I don't think that is possible without the same movement existing within the vocals. Having those dynamics, having those ebbs and flows, allowing some songs sometimes to feel very static, and just using different styles of vocals to really create the peaks and valleys is something that they did phenomenally well throughout the entire record. Overall, this album is just magnificent. But I have to say that I'm a fan of the first side versus the second. Not to say that one is better than the other. I just really gravitated to the more atmospheric driven songs that this record offered. It just had something special within them, and because you get more of that feeling, you get more of that sense in the first half of the album, I really gravitate towards it. But this is not to say that the album is not good from start to finish, because it is. It just comes down to what your preferences are, and if you like a little bit more variety, then you're going to enjoy the complete journey. For me, I tend to gravitate more towards one side of the band, and because that side is more prevalent in the first half, that's where I went with. But overall, the album is really well put together, incredibly crafted. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Rise of the Destroyer, a more driven track, one of those songs that really punches in, and this is the song that closes side A. So it closes side A on a strong note, on a powerful note, on a driven note with heaviness and intensity, while the vocals are super dynamic, adding some layers to it, really allowing the sound to be a little bit more compact while the vocals are creating the ebbs and flows. So you really feel musically the track stays a lot more grounded, and it's the vocals, the changes in styles and approaches that really creates the dynamic movement that the track needs, so you don't feel like you're sinking into it, but rather you feel like you're moving forward with it. Next, you have Alva Blot, a more methodic, heavy, atmospheric track. It really brings all the elements together. It's a very interesting song from that perspective, because it feels like it has a lot of layers to it, but all of these layers are really easy to digest. They're really easy to break down. The vocals create atmosphere. The layers that the vocals have, adding to the layers of sound, really help define the atmosphere of this song. And this is a track where the vocals really feel, more than perhaps any other song, like a narrator. And that adds a different vibe to the way the track comes across, because you feel like you're being told a story. This is a fireplace style story incorporated into a song format. And it has all of the elements that you need in order to really allow you to picture that image in front of you when you're going through the experience of listening to this track. The music helps, but the way the vocals come across, the way they're layered, that sense of being a narrator really brings everything together. Last but not least, you have Heimdals Horn. This is the last track on the album, and I feel like this is the perfect closing track for this record. First of all, I love the bass on this song. I love how much it sinks in the mood of the track. It really brings the mood down, gives you this very somber, dark mood, but it helps define what the rest of the track is going to sound like, because that mood stays alive and well even though the song becomes a little bit bigger, becomes a little bit heavier with a lot more intensity. That mood never really goes away. That fingerprint that the bass left at the beginning of the track stays true throughout the entire existence of the song. Using vocals as chants really changes how this song comes across, because it merges the two sides that we've seen throughout the entire record. It merges the atmospheric side of the album with the more black metal driven side of the album, and it becomes a chant. It becomes a bigger, a larger than life track that still carries a lot of atmosphere within it, and that is what changes this song, and that's what makes it different, but at the same time is what makes this the perfect closing track, because it brings all the pieces that we've gotten throughout the entire record together as one in order to finish the album with a sense of conclusion. This is the exclamation mark. This is the curtain coming down. Roll the credits. This is it. Ereb Altor, Vargtimman, out January 14th on Hammerheart Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.